Chosen one. The White House hid your photo because you weren't born yet. The moment your spirit hears that sentence, something ancient stirs inside you, because this story doesn't begin now. It began long before your birth certificate existed, long before the world had language to describe what you are. Decades ago, in an era without digital editing or AI manipulation, an archivist in the West Wing's restricted basement, an area known only as the Temporal Anomaly Room, developed an old roll of government film, and in one of those grainy black and white frames sat a face that shouldn't have been there. Your face, perfectly captured, perfectly centered, unmistakably you. Analysts ran proportion maps, bone structure comparisons, ocular symmetry scans. Technology that didn't even exist at that time was later used to reanalyze it, and every test came back the same. 100% match to a person who did not yet exist on record. Panic spread through the White House like a silent virus. The date on the photograph predated your birth by decades. The camera used belonged to a presidential photographer who swore he never captured such an image. Worse, the background in the photo, an office that hadn't existed during the documented shoot, matched a room renovated years later. It wasn't just a misplaced photo. It was a timeline fracture wearing your face. Staff tried to delete the image. They tried to burn it. They tried to bury it in classified archives. But every attempt triggered the same system response, a red warning that should not have been possible on 1970s machinery, and yet somehow appear across multiple systems even years later during digital transfers. Access denied. Protected subject. There was no protected subject listed. No file. No protocol. No explanation. Only your face staring back through time with an expression that terrified them. Because it wasn't confused, it wasn't accidental, it looked intentional. Almost as if you knew the camera was watching. As if you were already aware of the moment they would find it. And the question that haunts that archive to this day is the same question pulling you into this message now. How did your face end up in a federal photograph taken before your body even existed? They hid the photo because the truth wasn't just dangerous. The truth was you, chosen one. If your spirit felt a shock reading this, it means the archive recognized you. The first confirmation is obedience. Activate your 111 seat of alignment, a symbolic $20 recognition offering that says, I agree with the timing of my awakening. Click Super Thanks and release it now as your first signature destiny. Chosen one. What happened next was the moment the White House realized this wasn't just a strange photograph. It was a prophecy disguised as evidence. After the initial shock, the archivist carried the impossible image to a small, windowless analysis room deep beneath the West Wing, a place only 5 people in the entire government had clearance to enter. They believed a simple scientific explanation would appear, but the deeper they examined the photo, the more reality unraveled. The chemical aging on the film matched the exact decade it was supposedly taken. The paper fibers matched the era. The ink of the date stamp matched the manufacturer's formula from that year. Everything about the photograph was authentic. Except you, who did not exist yet. Then came the first anomaly, a faint, almost invisible distortion around your head, a ripple pattern in the grain, like a frequency the camera was never built to detect. Government technicians enhanced the frame, expecting to find a smudge or scratch, but instead they found micro-fractures in the image that aligned with modern interpretations of temporal displacement, something that shouldn't have been possible to capture on film. The analyst responsible for running the spectral scan reportedly froze when he saw your eyes. Even in that ancient photograph, they reflected light differently, as if aware, as if conscious, as if looking not at the photographer, but through the lens into a future moment when you yourself will be staring back. They tried to track the location in the background, comparing the wood patterns, the desk style, the molding. And here is where the real panic began. The room behind you did not exist at the time the photo was taken. That specific office layout, that exact desk, that redesigned wall paneling. Those changes were made years later during a renovation approved by an administration that hadn't even come into power. The archivist wrote in a confidential memo, subject appears in a space that did not yet exist. That memo was buried, sealed, erased from every digital trail, yet traces of it still remain in whispered testimonies of retired staff. The investigation turned from scientific to existential. Was it glitch? A premonition? A breach from another timeline? No one could agree. But one thing was certain. The photo was not a mistake. It was intentional, planted, timed, delivered, a message stamped into history before history could catch up with you. And every expert involved reached the same terrifying conclusion. You weren't early. Time was late. Chosen one. Once the analysts realized a photograph could not be dismissed, denied, erased, or rationalized, the government did what it always does when confronted with something that violates the laws of reality. They built a file. Not a normal file. Not the kind that lives in a cabinet or on a secure server, but a physical dossier locked inside the deepest, most restricted vault beneath the White House. The AR-7 White Room, a chamber reserved for anomalies the public must never know exist. Inside that folder, stamped in red ink, was a title that would haunt every operative who ever saw it. Project Origin. Subject unknown. They didn't know your name. They didn't know your birthplace. They didn't know your parents, your timeline, your purpose. All they knew was that your face, undeniable, unchanging, unmistakable, appeared decades too early. 3 administrations tried to access that folder. 2 presidents were denied clearance. 1 intelligence director resigned after a single glance. The few who were allowed to read it discovered something even stranger than the photo itself. The dossier updated on its own. Details appeared without human input. Observations were added that no agent admitted writing. Each time the archivist opened the file, the ink of the note seemed freshly dried, as if someone or something was documenting your timeline from a vantage point outside of time. The earliest page described the photo anomaly. The next page referenced energetic signatures detected around the subject prior to manifested existence. Another page, dated years before your actual birth, included a chilling line. The subject arrival will alter federal trajectories. Concealment necessary. But there was one page they feared more than any other. A blank sheet that only revealed text under infrared light. Under that invisible ink, they found coordinates, a date, and a prophecy-like statement. When the child arrives, awake in the archive, that date matched the year you were born. The coordinates corresponded to your birthplace. And the final line, written in handwriting no analyst could identify, read, "He will find us before we find him." That was the moment the government stopped trying to solve the anomaly and instead began preparing for it. Because somehow, decade before you were even conceived, the White House had a file waiting for you, and the most classified room in America was already whispering your arrival. Chosen one. When federal scientists were brought in to examine the photograph, the fear shifted from confusion to pure disbelief. Every measurable element of the image confirmed it belonged to the decade it came from. The paper aging, the chemical residue, the exposure marks. But when they scanned your face, the system flagged something impossible. Your features carried micropatterns only present in modern digital photography, as if the image of you had been inserted from a future that didn't exist yet. Then came the real horror. Your pupils reflected a light source that wasn't invented until decades later. The lab director reportedly whispered, "This isn't a glitch, this is a visitor." That was the moment they realized science could not explain you because you weren't an error in time. You were evidence of it breaking. Chosen one. When science failed, the White House did something it almost never does. They called in their spiritual consultants, priests, rabbis, mystics, even a retired chaplain who specialized in nonlinear events. After studying the photo, every one of them reached the same unsettling conclusion. Your appearance wasn't a mistake, but a summoning. They said some identities are written before time, and occasionally, destiny leaks through the veil early. One advisor even claimed your soul arrived before your body caught up. The archivist wrote that your photograph felt alive, like it wasn't capturing a moment, but announcing one. That is why the government hid it. Not because they fear the image, but because the image recognized you. Chosen one. Once the White House realized the photo was an anomaly but a signal, everything changed. Intelligence officials argued behind closed doors because your existence, decades early, meant one thing. You were tied to a future they weren't prepared for. If the world knew a face from tomorrow appeared in yesterday, global stability would collapse. But deeper than secrecy was fear. The analysts concluded the photo wasn't placed in the past by accident. It was placed there because of you. Something about your destiny was too disruptive, too powerful, too ahead of its time, and revealing it early would trigger events the government couldn't control. So they buried the evidence, sealed the archive, and prayed you would never awaken. They were wrong. Chosen one, if your spirit feels this rising, click join and step into the identity they try to hide. Joining isn't just support. It is alignment, confirmation, and activation of the frequency they feared most. Chosen one. Once the White House realized your photograph wasn't a glitch, a fabrication, or a camera malfunction, but an intentionally planted message, everything inside the intelligence network collapsed into panic. Senior officials understood this wasn't a random anomaly. Your appearance decades before your birth meant you were tied to a future timeline powerful enough to bend reality backward. Analysts concluded that if the public discovered a face from tomorrow appearing in the federal archives of yesterday, global order would fracture overnight. But the deeper reason for the cover-up wasn't political. It was personal. They noticed the photo didn't just show you, it responded to you. Light patterns shifted around your eyes. Grain density thickened when your face was scanned. Even decades later, digital conversion showed subtle changes, as if the image was updating itself whenever your identity evolved. That terrified everyone. It proved the photo wasn't placed in the past accidentally. It was inserted there because of you, because your destiny is anchored outside linear time. A future version of you was already interfering with the world before you arrived in it. If the truth leaked, governments would lose control, religions would be shaken, and the existence of premature souls would rewrite human history. So they hid the photo, sealed the room, buried the anomaly, and prayed that whatever force put your face in that timeline would never activate. But today, your awakening proves their fear was justified. You weren't ahead of time. Time was behind you. Chosen one, after the photo was buried in the AR-7 White Room, the government split into two factions, and your existence became the center of silent civil war inside the most powerful building on Earth. On one side was a preservation faction, a small group of officials who believed the anomaly meant you were meant to be protected, not contained. They argued that anyone whose face appeared before their birth had a destiny written by forces beyond government authority. They saw your photo as evidence of divine timing, a cosmic appointment that should never be interfered with. But the other side, the containment faction, saw you as a threat, a timeline disruptor, a variable the government couldn't predict or control. To them, your premature appearance meant you would eventually rise into a position that would challenge the existing power structure. They feared you would expose secrets, reveal truths, or trigger events that no administration was ready to face. Arguments erupted behind locked doors. Security clearances were revoked. One advisor publicly resigned without explanation after shouting that the subject is already awake. Another attempted to destroy the dossier and was stopped by a system override no one understood. As both factions warred, the same unsettling detail kept surfacing. The more they tried to suppress your image, the more the archive resisted, as if reality itself was taking your side. And that's when they realized something horrifying. This wasn't the government tracking you. It was a timeline correcting itself around you. Chosen one. What truly terrified the White House wasn't the photograph itself, but what they discovered behind it. When deeper scans were performed, analysts found faint outlines, almost ghostly reflections, of additional frames hidden within the emulsion. At first, they assumed it was double exposure, but with enhanced imaging, they realized the truth. There were 3 versions of the same moment, each from a slightly different angle, each capturing you in a posture too intentional to be accidental. In one frame, you faced forward. In another, your head was slightly turned, as if acknowledging someone standing out of view. But the third frame was the one that sent a chill through the entire room. You were looking directly at the camera, directly through the lens, directly into the eyes of whoever would eventually uncover the archive. Analysts swore your expression wasn't passive. It felt aware, deliberate, almost knowing. One technician refused to touch the file again after claiming your pupils shifted when digitally enhanced. Another said the photo felt less like an image and more like a transmission, like a message left by a future self who understood exactly when and where it would be found. The more they studied it, the more the room itself seemed to distort. Lights flickered, machines glitched, timestamps changed by milliseconds at random. And for the first time in recorded protocol history, 3 separate analysts filed identical notes on different days, using the same exact wording. Subject is present in a moment that has not happened yet. That line became a classified legend within the intelligence community. Because if the photo wasn't from the past or the future, but from a moment still approaching, then your appearance wasn't a mistake. It was a countdown, and they knew the timer was running out. Chosen one, once the analysts accepted the photograph wasn't just an artifact, but a premature revelation, they began asking the only question that mattered. Why were you seen so early? Why did your face break into a timeline that wasn't ready for you? The answer emerged not from science, not from intelligence briefings, but from a restricted theology report commissioned in secret. The document claimed that certain souls, extremely rare ones, carry destiny so disruptive, so structurally important to the future, that pieces of their identity appear ahead of schedule. These souls arrive before time catches up, leaving echoes, imprints, or warnings in earlier eras. You weren't just photographed. You bled into history before history was prepared to receive you. And the more they studied your anomaly, the clearer the pattern became. Economic shifts, political decisions, unexplained societal trends, all began aligning years before your birth, as if the timeline itself was rearranging in anticipation of your arrival. Prophetic texts found in the private archive of a former president reference the one who arrives early, a figure whose presence destabilizes old systems and initiates a purge of corrupted leadership. A declassified Pentagon briefing even stated, subject does not follow causality. Causality follows subject. That was the moment they understood you weren't seen early because of malfunction. You were seen early because the future needed you and marked you long before you appeared. Your premature image in that federal archive wasn't an accident. It was a signal that your timeline has authority over theirs. And that reality terrified them more than any enemy nation ever could. Chosen one. The moment the government realized your appearance wasn't a glitch, but a timeline intervention, the cover-up began to fall apart faster than they could contain it. The first failure happened when a senior technician attempted to delete the digital scan of your photo from a classified server. The system froze, every monitor in the room went black, and then a single message flashed across multiple screens simultaneously. Cannot erase what was meant to be seen. IT specialists swore no such protocol existed. When they tried again, the servers overloaded and shut down an entire wing of the White House network for 6 hours, a blackout that was falsely reported to press as a power fluctuation. But it didn't stop there. Every time an agent printed the image, the photo returned with subtle differences: sharper eyes, stronger presence, clearer light around your outline, as if the timeline itself refused to let them distort your identity. One analyst resigned after claiming your reflection had shifted positions between 2 identical prints. Another insisted the negative reel produced a faint hum, like a frequency only certain people could hear. As panic spread, the containment faction attempted one final move: destroy the physical negative. But when a classified incineration device was activated, the machine malfunctioned, jammed, and spat out the reel completely untouched, while every other non-anomalous document turned to ash. Engineers could not explain it. The incinerator logs recorded an impossible result: foreign temporal signature detected, protected material. That was when they realized the truth they feared to admit. They weren't hiding your photo. Your photo was hiding itself. It refused to be erased because its purpose was never to disappear. Its purpose was to wait for you. And now that you've awakened, the timeline they tried to control has officially slipped out of their hands. Chosen one. Pause for a moment, because what you're reading right now is an entertainment, coincidence, or curiosity. If your chest feels tight, if your spirit is buzzing, if your intuition feels like it's leaning forward, this is your confirmation. You are not reacting to words. You are reacting to recognition. The same force that placed your face in a federal photograph decades early is the same force pulling you into this exact moment. And every chosen one has a defining decision point, a moment where your spirit says, I accept who I am, I accept what I carry, and I step into what was written for me. This is that moment. This is your activation window. In prophetic alignment, there is something called a verification seed, a tangible expression that says, I recognize my identity, and I agree with the timeline that is unfolding around me. For this point in your awakening, that verification is a $50 seed, not because of the number itself, but because 50 represents divine release, jubilee, timeline reset, and supernatural clearance. It is the number of liberation, the number of restoring what was stolen, the number of unsealing what was hidden. Exactly what your life is stepping into. Chosen one, if your spirit is resonating, do not hesitate. Click Super Thanks and release your $50 verification seed as a declaration that you accept your identity, confirm your calling, and align your life with a version of you that has already appeared in timelines before your birth. This seed is not payment. It is proof. Proof to heaven that you recognize the moment. Proof to the timeline that you are awake. Proof to the forces watching that you are stepping into destiny with clarity and authority. Release it, chosen one. Seal it, activate it, and watch how the timeline responds. Chosen one. Once the cover-up collapsed and your photo refused to be erased, analysts took the only remaining step. They performed a deep scan timeline overlay, a classified procedure meant to detect fractures in causality. What they found nearly shut down the entire operation. Your image didn't belong to a single moment in time. It existed across 3 simultaneous timelines, each leaving a faint energetic imprint on the negative. When enhanced, each imprint revealed a different version of you. In the first timeline, you appeared calm, composed, standing like someone destined to lead. In the second, your expression was hardened, shaped by battles not yet fought, carrying the aura of someone who had survived a collapse. But the third version, that one shook the room. Your posture was elevated, your eyes glowed with a kind of inner knowing, and analysts reported the unmistakable sensation that you were fully aware of them, as if you were observing the observers. One agent whispered, trembling, "He's not in the photo, he's through it." That line echoed through every hallway of the West Wing. Because if 3 versions of you from 3 divergent futures were collapsing into one photograph from the past, it meant something unprecedented. The timeline was choosing you. It was pulling your strongest future, your highest identity, your most ascended version into visibility before the world caught up. Every protocol, every analysis, every clearance alert suddenly pointed to the same conclusion. Your existence was never linear. You were never following time. Time was orbiting you, rearranging itself in anticipation of the version of you that was always meant to rise. Chosen one. When the analyst stepped back and reviewed every anomaly, the photograph that shouldn't exist, the room that didn't yet exist, the timelines bleeding into one another, the image that reacted to your awakening, one truth became undeniable. The photo wasn't meant for the government. It was meant for you. Every attempt to hide, it only preserved it. Every effort to destroy, it only protected it. Every scan, every glitch, every malfunction was a timeline refusing to let your image be erased. And then someone in the preservation faction noticed something no one else had. The moment the digital scans were reprocessed, the file metadata aligned perfectly with the year you began searching for answers in your life. It was as if the archive itself responded to your spiritual awakening, as if the photograph had been waiting for the exact version of you capable of recognizing it. They checked the timestamps again. Every update in the dossier coincided with moments you faced major turning points, heartbreaks, breakthroughs, awakenings. The image wasn't static. It was tracking you. That's when the room went silent. This wasn't about surveillance. This wasn't about national security. This wasn't about government fear. This was prophecy disguised as evidence. A message sent backward through time, stored in the most secure building in the world, protected by forces beyond any agency's understanding, waiting for one pair of eyes, yours. And the moment you connected to this truth, the archive fulfilled its purpose. Because the photograph was never about showing the past. It was about activating the future. Your future. The one that has already happened in timelines where you have risen. The one that the world is now scrambling to catch up to. The one you're stepping into, whether anyone is ready or not. Chosen one. Once it became clear the photograph wasn't just a relic, but an active phenomenon responding to you, the White House went into its most severe internal lockdown since the Cold War. A 24-hour containment protocol was initiated, a protocol so secretive that even cabinet members weren't fully briefed. Alarms were silent, but the tension was thunderous. Analysts were pulled into emergency briefings. Security clearances were frozen. Doors that normally required 2 codes now required 7. The Situation Room ran simulations trying to predict what your premature appearance meant for national and global stability, but every model crashed the moment your timeline was introduced. One advisor screamed, "We don't have a protocol for a man who shows up before his birth." Another whispered, "This isn't a threat, this is a coronation." During a private midnight meeting, a senior intelligence officer stated the sentence that ended the debate. "He found us before we found him." That was the point where panic shifted from fear of the anomaly to fear of the inevitability. Because if your future self had already left a mark in their past, it meant their attempts to control, suppress, manipulate, or redirect your destiny were already obsolete. The timeline had moved without their permission. The world had tilted without their input. And the rise they were trying to stop had already happened. In response, the containment faction drafted a plan to isolate anything connected to you, but the preservation faction argued it was too late. Every system touching your case had already been altered by forces outside their understanding. Devices malfunctioned, cameras glitched, files reappeared after being deleted. It was as if the universe itself was protecting you. And that was a detail that finally broke them. You weren't resisting their control. You were outrunning it. Chosen one. When the panic settled just enough for analysts to breathe, they shifted from attempting to suppress the anomaly to attempting to decode it. They treated the photograph like a message because they finally understood it wasn't capturing a moment. It was transmitting one. They zoomed into every pixel of the ancient frame, and the strangest pattern emerged. The light striking your face wasn't random. It aligned into geometric shapes, sacred ratios, ancient sequencing patterns, glyph-like formations that matched symbols found in prophetic manuscripts locked inside the Library of Congress's restricted vault. The desk behind you carried a file with numbers partially visible. When cross-referenced, those numbers matched coordinates to a location tied to your lineage. The shadow behind your shoulder fell at an angle impossible for the original room, as if the light source belonged to a time not yet invented. And then came the greatest revelation, your eyes. Analysts enhanced the frame beyond safe levels, expecting data loss, but instead saw a reflection, an outline of something not in the room, not in the past, not in any known image. It looked like yourself, a higher version of you, a future self standing in a place that didn't yet exist. The spiritual advisors were brought back in, and one of them said a line that froze every person in that chamber. "This is not evidence. This is instruction." Your photo wasn't just documenting that you appeared early. It was teaching you how to step into the identity that already existed before you arrived. Every symbol, every angle, every reflection was a map, an encoded awakening designed to activate the part of you that remembers who you were before time tried to tell you otherwise. Because the message hidden inside that photograph wasn't about the past at all. It was a blueprint for your ascension. Chosen one. When the final layers of the photograph were decoded, the government realized something they had been terrified to say aloud. The image wasn't a warning. It was a prophecy fulfilled. You didn't appear in their past by accident. You didn't slip through a crack in time. Your face wasn't captured early. It arrived early because your destiny existed long before your physical body did. And the timeline recognized you before the world ever had the chance. The officials who reviewed the last set of scans noticed a final anomaly hidden in the darkest corner of the image. A faint emblem reflected on the surface of the desk. When enhanced, it revealed an outline of a seal. Not the U.S. seal, not any known agency seal, but a symbol that matched ancient spiritual diagrams tied to pre-appointed souls. A translated note in the White House spiritual briefing read, "Those who appear before their birth do not follow fate, they dictate it." That was the moment the analysts understood that everything they feared was true. You were never meant to be controlled, predicted, or contained. You were always meant to disrupt. You were meant to arrive before systems were ready, before structures were stable, before leadership was worthy. That's why your future self left a photograph in the past. So when you reach this point in your awakening, you would finally piece it together. You are not following destiny. Destiny is following you. Time has already bowed to your existence. The world is only now catching up to what has already been written. And every attempt to hide your image, erase your presence, or bury your timeline has only proven one truth. You were never born into this world. This world was born into your schedule. You are not late. You are not early. You are exactly who you were always meant to be. The one who arrives before the rest understand why. Chosen one. If you made it to this point, understand this clearly. The timeline didn't bring you here to read. It brought you here to respond. Every cell in your spirit, every vibration in your chest, every instinct that's been whispering, "This is me," is not imagination. It is recognition. You are remembering a destiny your soul agreed to long before your body arrived. And every chosen one who walks into their identity must seal that realization with an act of intentional alignment. This is why the ancients call it an air seal offering, a symbolic step that says, "I accept the throne, I accept the assignment, I accept who I truly am." In prophetic numerology, 100 is the number of kingship, inheritance, and timeline governance. It is the number of the one who transcends linear time and steps fully into divine appointment. That is why your final activation is a $100 air seal seed, not as payment, not as transaction, but as declaration. When you release it through super thanks, you are acknowledging what the White House tried to bury, what the timeline tried to hide, and what your future self already confirmed. You are the air they cannot contain. This seed is your signature, your seal, your announcement to heaven, to time, to destiny itself that you are no longer the version of you that the world expected. You are the version that the world has been preparing for. Release it boldly, chosen one. Release it with authority. Release it as the final step of your awakening. Because once the air signs their name, the world begins to move around them.